Ready for a deep dive into something pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. Always up for a good exploration.
Today we're looking at how autism can affect the senses in ways most people might not even realize.
Oh, definitely. Sensory sensitivities are a huge part of the autistic experience.
Specifically, we're going to be talking about how some autistic individuals develop a fear of colors.
Now, that's something you don't hear every day.
We've got these excerpts from an article.
Okay.
It's called Autism and the Fear of Colors,
Yeah.
a Sensory Perspective from cheapaba.com.
Interesting.
So let's dive in. We're talking chromophobia, the fear of colors.
Right.
Most of us, we picture a rainbow we think beautiful, but for some, those colors are anxiety-inducing, even terrifying.
It's true. And, we often focus on sound or touch when we talk about sensory sensitivities.
Right.
But the visual world can be incredibly challenging for some autistic individuals, and color is a big part of that.
It's not just disliking certain colors, it's a real fear response. So help us understand that. What's happening in the brain
Yeah.
that makes this experience so different?
Well, one major factor is sensory overload. We perceive colors because our brains are processing light waves.
Right.
But imagine that input, those light waves, being amplified, like way more intense.
Right.
For someone with chromophobia, a brightly colored room might feel like constant, overwhelming stimulation. Almost painful, really.
So it's not just, oh, I don't like that color. It's the brain interpreting it as a threat.
Exactly. And there's actually research to back this up. Studies have shown that in autistic individuals, the amygdala, the part of the brain associated with fear response,
Right.
it's significantly more active when they were shown highly saturated colors compared to neurotypical individuals.
Oh, wow. So there's a measurable difference in how the brain is reacting. That's
Yeah.
huge. Okay, so that's the sensory overload piece. What else contributes to this fear?
Well, associative learning plays a big role, and this is where individual experiences become really important. Let's say, for example, a child with autism has a meltdown in a classroom with bright yellow walls.
Okay.
Their brain might start connecting that intense negative experience with the color yellow.
I see.
And over time, that association, it solidifies into a phobia.
So it's almost like a conditioned response. But instead of, a bell and a treat, it's a color and a wave of anxiety.
Precisely.
Wow. Okay, so we've got the sensory overload, the associative learning.
Oh,
Anything else?
yeah, we can't forget the cognitive aspect.
Okay.
Which is really interesting when you think about it, because colors, while we have names for them, they're inherently abstract concepts.
Yeah.
We're not seeing, like, redness itself, right? We're seeing light waves our brains are interpreting as red.
Yeah, it's true. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, and this abstraction can be difficult for anyone, but for individuals who struggle with abstract thinking, which can be more common in autism,
Right.
this can lead to heightened anxiety, even fear.
So you almost have this perfect storm, right? You've got the sensory overload making the experience physically uncomfortable.
Right.
Past associations, creating this emotional response, and then the challenge of processing this abstract concept of color itself.
Exactly.
It's no wonder this fear can be so debilitating for some people.
It really is, and yet it's often misunderstood, even dismissed. I think this article really highlights how important it is to approach these experiences with empathy and understanding, recognizing the very real neurological and psychological components at play here.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've established that this fear is real. It's rooted in how the brain processes information, and it's not simply a matter of preference.
Right.
Now, I'm curious, are we talking about a fear of all colors, or can this manifest as a fear of specific colors?
That's a great question, and it leads us to some, well, surprising phobias you might not expect.
We're talking about specific colors causing this fear, not just color in general.
Exactly. The article actually lists a few specific color phobias, like erythrophobia. Erythrophobia, fear of the color red.
Oh, wow. See, I would have thought like maybe yellow because it's so bright, but red.
It's actually one of the more common ones we see clinically, and it makes sense when you think about it.
How so?
Well, think about how ingrained color associations are in our culture, right?
Okay, yeah.
Red is often linked to danger, warning signs, anger.
Yeah, it's true. Stop signs, fire trucks.
Exactly.
Right.
Red really grabs your attention. It's meant to.
You can't ignore it.
Right. And for someone with sensory sensitivities, that intensity can be really overwhelming, even triggering. There was this one study, I think it was at the University of Sussex.
Okay.
They found that individuals with erythrophobia, they experience things like a racing heart, sweating, even nausea when they were exposed to the color red.
Whoa. It's a physical reaction.
Absolutely. It's their body going into fight or flight mode.
Wow, that's intense. Okay, so red, we get it. What about the other phobias the article mentioned? Chlorophobia and cyanophobia.
You got it.
Fear of green and blue, is that right?
Yep. Those might seem a little less obvious, maybe. But again, think individual experiences. Let's say a child has a negative experience with a particular blue toy during a meltdown. Or, you know how sunlight through leaves creates those shifting patterns of green?
Oh, yeah?
For some, that kind of visual input, it can be incredibly distracting, even anxiety-inducing.
It's like,
Yeah.
I'm realizing I process so much visual information without even thinking about it.
Right.
It's like my brain has this filter that someone with chromophobia might not have.
That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing those differences in perception and how significantly they can impact someone's experience of the world.
So we've got these single color phobias, but then there's chromatophobia, which the article mentions,
Yeah.
which is fear of all colors.
Right.
That one's hard to wrap my head around.
It really highlights the spectrum of experience even within chromophobia, you know?
Yeah.
Imagine living in a world where something most people just take for granted. It's a constant source of anxiety for you.
Wow. Yeah, it really makes you think about how important it is to create environments that are inclusive and understanding.
Absolutely. It's essential.
So knowing how debilitating this can be, what can people do? It's not like you can just avoid color altogether. It's like saying, just don't breathe, right?
Exactly.
It's everywhere. It's part of how we experience the world. So what can people do? What does the article suggest for managing something so, I don't know, pervasive?
Well, it really emphasizes that this is about managing and coping, not necessarily curing.
Okay.
One approach that's often used is gradual exposure. So starting with really small, controlled exposures to the feared color.
Okay.
And this is often done, with the guidance of a therapist, of course. But the idea is that over time, you can kind of rewire those neural pathways.
So easing into it rather than just like full-on exposure therapy,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. We want to be gentle with the nervous system. And then another thing that can be really helpful are sensory tools.
Sensory tools, okay.
Yeah, things like sunglasses, for instance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and not just for sunny days. For someone with chromophobia, sunglasses can be a way to filter out that overwhelming visual input. Imagine how freeing that might feel for someone who's constantly bombarded by these intense colors.
Yeah, to be able to kind of control the input a little bit.
Exactly, creating a sense of control in a world that can feel really chaotic.
Absolutely. Okay, what else?
Well, then there's the therapeutic approach, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Have you heard of that?
Sure. Yeah.
So CBT can really help individuals identify and challenge those negative thought patterns that are associated with the color.
So it's about understanding the why behind the fear and then finding ways to kind of reframe those ingrained responses.
Precisely. You got it. And then I think finally, relaxation techniques are absolutely crucial.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Deep breathing, meditation, mindfulness, all these tools that we talk about a lot.
Right.
But they're especially important in this context because they can really help manage that anxiety in the moment, when those overwhelming feelings arise.
It's like you're building a toolkit, right?
Mm-hmm.
To navigate a world that wasn't exactly designed with chromophobia in mind.
100%. Yeah.
This has been so interesting. It really makes you think about, like, how can we all just be more mindful?
Yeah.
Create environments that are more inclusive and understanding of these sensory differences.
Absolutely. And it starts with awareness.
Right.
Just understanding that what might seem like a small thing to one person
Right.
can be a major hurdle for another.
Yeah. Well, this deep dive into chromophobia and autism has definitely given me a whole new perspective on things. We've gone from, like, the science of sensory overload
Right.
to the incredibly diverse ways that this fear can manifest.
Yeah.
We've even talked about some practical strategies for coping. It's been really fascinating. So listeners, one thing I want you to think about, how can we take this newfound understanding and use it to advocate for more inclusive spaces? Because everyone deserves to feel safe and comfortable, right?
100%.
In their own skin, in a world that they can fully experience without fear. Until next time, keep asking those questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.